So yeah, if I turn off my camera, please don't take offense on it. I usually turn off my camera if I feel like your voice is getting choppy, just to make sure that the internet remains stable. So without further ado, under the third motion that this House believes that environmentalists should push for massive investment in coal gasification as opposed to traditional renewable energy source, we call upon the first affirmative. Here.
Great. Am I audible and visible?
Yep, you are both.
Great. Thank you so much for the confirmation. I use he, him pronouns. So in the future, in any other speeches, if you want to address me, just say he or him. All right. Great. 3, 2, 1. Two things in setup before I proceed. Number one, what is the burden identification in this motion? What should we fulfill and what should opposition fulfill? Two things. Number one, I think that there is a clear trade-off on both sides of the House. I think that it's clear that under opposition side of the House, they cannot say that gasification will still happen under their side of the House, but they have to defend and not intervening to the usage of like coal under their side of the House. Therefore, what they should wholly focus on is defending the existence of renewable energy and why is that good under the side of the House, right? But number two, what will we do under our side of the House? We say that we can trade off renewable energy because renewable energy in the Christian school cannot go where anyway. We'll explain to you later as to why it's highly inaccessible for a lot of companies, for example, and a lot of nations. But we'll be using this alternative of like gasification, for example, until that then someone can find like a renewable energy that's feasible and innovative. But in the meantime, I feel like when we cannot find that yet, I think it's not best to pursue the development of renewable energy or wholly shifting at least to renewable energy. But second point of setup, right? What is coal gasification? Two things on this one. Number one, I think that it is a fiat that coal gasification is a more environmentally friendly. So under this side of the House, they cannot demonize the existence of like coal gasification because we think that at the end of the day, as environmentalists, what you want to do is at least pursue a betterment of the world, even if it is the small steps possible. But number two, I think that under our side of the House, we also concede that coal is something that's irreplaceable in some sectors of the industry. Therefore, not all renewable energy resources will be a good replacement. This looks like liquid fuel that is still massively used. There is still no, for example, like return of or there's still no like renewable energy when it comes to like fuel, for example, and there are very limited electric cars in the current status quo. Even if, for example, it's replaceable, we know that one fact for sure is that it increases the price of the commodity production, therefore making it pricey to be accessed by a lot of people. With those two set up in the way, very proud to propose. I'm going to bring two things. Number one, I'm going to massively talk about like how will the existence of coal gasification at least bring progress to environmentalism in the current status quo. How will it still benefit companies and how will it still benefit our movement even in the slightest bit? But number two, I'm also going to talk about a little bit regarding why the principle of like of like pursuing environmentalism this way is something that's completely justified, looking into the issues that environmentalism face in the current status quo. So first substantive regarding a practical ground regarding how will we benefit those actors we've already mentioned before. I have three layers on this one, right? Number one, I think it's important to identify the problem in the current status quo threefold. Number one, what is the issue with renewable energy, therefore making it inaccessible in a lot of places, therefore kind of problematic? Four things. Number one, it is very expensive. This looks like solar panels, for example, that are still used in a lot of like rich people's homes for sure. But I think that when you look into like middle class homes or lower class homes, for example, you are not able to find solar panels because they still rely on electricity due to the priciness of like solar panels. But number two, I think that you have to understand there needs to be a high technological advancements that needs to come along with the existence of renewable energy. However, this doesn't mean that a lot of states actually have it. For example, this looks like even if you want to replace the power of electricity with solar panels, for example, or even if you want to like pursue the existence of solar panels to charge the cars, for example, I think that a lot of places still use fuel or even like have limited capacity capacity to actually develop their existing technological advancements. Therefore, it's highly inaccessible to a lot of places. But number three, it's very important to note that renewable energy is something that's not portable, meaning that in a lot of places it's not accessible to begin with. This looks like if you want to pay attention to the creation of PLTA, it doesn't mean that it's going to be accessible in a lot of rural areas, because most likely you need to have a strong source of water, for example, to be able to produce electricity. But at the end of the day, it's going to be something that is limited in a lot of areas, making it coal the only option to exist, right? But I think that fourthly, understand that the production of energy, even if you want to use renewable energy, is something that takes a long time. This is because the physical process of renewable energy is not as easy, because like the process has so much residue, for example, because you need to have a proper like fuel to actually, to translate the energy, for example, right? Exactly why burning process of coal makes it able to access or create energy. Therefore, there's no shortage of energy whatsoever. But number two, the second problem is that you have to understand the stigmatization of environmentalism in the current status quo. They're literally being seen as an elitist community with two implications that are false. Number one, you have to understand that the radical push towards renewable energy that is pretty radical in the current status quo makes it quite unbelievable and makes them seem as a movement that's like not necessarily believable to begin with. But number two, therefore there is distrust towards like environmentalism, because like people see it as an unreasonable movement. For example, like in the current status quo, there is no reason for people to, for example, throw paints into oil paintings, for example, etc., or like spoiling milk in the floor, for example. But because that are some implications that actually exist in the current status quo, that's why it's completely bad for us. But number three, I think that it's also important to analyze that under both sides of the house, companies will still touch coals regardless of the existing mechanisms, even if they want to make the best renewable energy possible, because of two faults as well. Number one, it's literally easy for them to be able to access existing coal with like existing technology, existing mining, for example, because it's much more cheaper, it's more accessible, etc. But number two, I think it's important that the usage of like renewable energy is something that's incredibly expensive technologies. Therefore, like a lot of companies will not risk it, because obviously the products that they are going to create with the existence of renewable energy is something that's going to be significantly more expensive. Secondly, then, how is this going to be solved under our side of the house? Why is it important? So three faults on this one. Number one, the creation of energy is better under our side of the house because there are three things. Number one, there are more sustainable energy with the stability of the price and accessibility towards companies. It means that if you pursue coal gasification, I think that because it's a fiat that it's going to be more environmentally friendly at the very least, this is going to be at least create progress towards like the waste that's going to be created by a lot of companies. But number two, I think that at the very least, the existence of coal gasification is more feasible. You can get coal easily, for example, and just do gasification from it. Therefore, technological advancements is not necessarily the biggest barrier towards like people or companies, most companies or most countries accessing these. But number three, I think that there's a shorter time of creating energy. This leads to a natural and healthy production market cycle. This means that production and demand stays hand in hand. There's the ability for companies to create continuous supply, for example, towards products. So there is no inflation whatsoever or the increase of price in things that needs to be accessed, right? But number two, stigmatization will not happen. This is because environmentalists will be seen as communities that still wants to bargain and compromise with the existing mechanisms. They will be also seen by the people and companies as someone that's like at least more supportive to the existing options, therefore not seen as elitist. This means that at the very least, people want to opt into them, or people want to actually sympathize with their concerns because they're not radicalists. But number three, I think it's important to note that companies will continue the use of coals in a more sustainable way, furthermore, keeping the price stability of the commodities, which is important to the accessibility of especially middle class or lower class communities that exist throughout the world. Third layer then, how is this a problem under this side of the house? Several faults. Number one, renewable energy is not effective under this side of the house. Even if it does, we have explained to you as to why it's going to be more inaccessible. If anything, if they try to pursue it under their side of the house, they need to face the backlash coming from the people on the increase of price, etc. But number two, coal is going to be used anyway on their side of the house. They need to explain why it's that drastically going to be different the moment that they introduce new renewable energy. Very proud to propose.
We thank the first affirmative for that speech. To open negative side of the house, we call upon the first negative. Here, here. Fire is negative.
Sorry for the delay. I'm just setting up my timer. Yeah. So before that, hi, my name is Kuko. Pronouns he or him. I'm sorry I can't turn on my camera because currently, yeah, the internet is not that good because of the rain. Yeah. Begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. One response to our side of government, right, on the idea of price hike because of the delay or because of the less amount of extraction from coal, right? We still think that price hike will still happen under their side of the house, right? But why does that still happen, right? Exactly why? Because they need to take more process in extracting, in creating the coal gasification, right? It is different from, for example, from traditional coal where you just extract it and burn it, right? You need more process, you need more time, and you also need, for example, better technology. Price hike under their side of the house will still be there, but why on the other side of the house, at least we have some progress towards fixing the environmental problems. I'll explain later in my speech, right? What do we want here aside opposition, right? We still want to pursue conventional renewable resources, right? Because we believe that currently it is still, because we believe that coal is still damaging the environmental problems, and also to provide a better source of investment, right? A few contexts before moving on, right? Firstly, what do we mean here by renewable resources, right? For example, when they have small amount of residue, right? For example, dams, solar panels, and whatnot. Right? And secondly, we believe that we still want to push for innovation or for example, progress on the other side of the house, and for example, creating better solar panels or more effective solar panels and whatnot, right? My speech will be divided in under two parts. First, why coal gasification will still impact the environment, and second, why investment will be better on the other side of the house, right? Let's talk about why coal gasification will still impact the environment, right? Consider how badly the status quo currently is, right? We don't think that team government have the chance or have the choice to actually go back and still using coal, because considering that coal are one of the biggest reasons why the status quo is very very hot, or why the environmental problem why the environmental problem is still that bad, right? Team government failed to explain to us why, when the moment coal is the biggest contributors under their side of the house, it is okay to use one of the biggest contributors towards the environmental problems, which is coal itself, right? And so, but moreover, we believe that exactly why we believe that extraction will still happen under their side of the house, right? Why understand that the extraction is still have the same impact, right? Okay, coal gasification is not the impact as normal coal, but the extraction part or the extraction is still there, right? Consider, let's just try to portray it as 50-50, right? We believe that there will still be a huge amount of residue coming from the coal extraction, right? Because considering that you, for example, you need to do massive deforestation, right? You also need, for example, huge machinery and whatnot to actually extract the coal, right? We still think that under their side of the house, they have failed to prove to us why coal will create a more progressive status in the environmental environmental problems itself, right? And understanding that the renewable energy it is way more environmental friendly, right? There's no downside, for example, such as extracting coal, right? The impacts of extracting coal is exclusive under their side of the house, right? We do acknowledge that coal extraction will still be there, but at least there are some progress in making that coal extraction lessen and lessen, right? Then under their side of the house, coal extraction will be way worse and will be more incentivized and incentivized at the end of the day, right? At least on the other side of the house, we believe that there are still progress, right? What do we mean by progress here, right? For example, there are more electric cars, there are more renewable energy sources that is currently happening under our side of the house, right? Therefore, we believe that on the other side of the house there will be still progressivity, right? But even if on the other side of the house it will take way longer, we still think that it's okay, right? Because first, we still think under their side of the house it's just still hard to implement coal gasification, right? They can't just say, oh, coal gasification will somehow happen everywhere in the world, right? They still, for example, need to pursue persuade other, for example, developing countries who do not want to change their way of living to actually use coal gasification. Constantly, coal gasification takes way more time, and also we believe that, for example, coal gasification also needs more better technology than what the developing country have currently what the developing country currently have right now. Right, considering that it is still new tech, we still believe that it will still take a while, right? So, but why understand that it will better? Because at least we eradicate the incentives to use coal as a whole, and we will push for a more renewable world, right? Second argument, why investment will be better on the rest of the house, right? We do acknowledge that currently using renewable energy takes a lot of resources, right? But this is still not exclusive, right? Exactly because coal gasification still takes way more money and more time itself, right? Considering that they still need to, for example, develop the technology more, develop the technology more, right? But considering that that not all countries in the world have coal, right? This creates a monopolization by certain countries, right? Thus, these certain countries who don't have access towards coal must import from other countries, right? At least on the other side of the house, when you use renewable energy, everybody have, for example, a unit renewable energy, right? For example, even in the Middle East, you can use solar panels, or for example, if you have a lush, if you have a big river, you can use a dam and whatnot, right? This makes the renewable energy source standards of the house more inclusive, right? Therefore, every nation in the world have the incentives to use the renewable energy, not like under their side of the house. Right? Understand that even under the side of the house, they need to repair damage from the coal, right? What do we mean here, right? For example, it looks like repairing damage from the woods that have been mowed down from the deforestation and not, right? The more we extract, the more damage you have from mining itself, right? Considering now under their side of the house, there will be more incentive, right? Because now coal corporations will still pursue more coal gasification, right? Because now they're trying, because of coal gasification, exactly why? Because it takes a longer time. There is a justification for these coal companies to actually create a price hike at the end, of the day, right? Therefore, more countries and also more corporations will actually try to pursue more coal at the end of the day, more environmental problem coming from there. So that's understand that this will create a snowball effect where more and more forest deforestation will happen, right? And at least on the other side of the house, we at least have the tool to use renewable energy, right? For example, for example, at least on the other side of the house, at the end of the day, we somehow, for example, have the tools to actually extract the renewable energy, right? I understand on the other side of the house, all the money go to coal gentrification. There is no such thing as progressivity into creating a perfect renewable world, right? At least understand that these developing countries have already been aware, right? Because the government already realized that there is damage, for example, sudden storm, or for example, the hot climate, right? Understand that government is also very, very pragmatic, right? They do not want the environment in their country to be bad, right? Therefore, they have the incentives to actually create a better renewable energy, right? With that, each country have environmentalists to check and balance, right? This looks like, for example, giving the government directions, or for example, creating any wrongful acts, right? Understand. Even in the current status quo, that there are so many campaigns that the society will be exposed to, right? For example, there is an incentive on education, right? An incentive on the education that can be utilized so that the country can actually, so that the developing country will still, for example, pursue or will actually accept the longer run, which is renewable energy. So proud to oppose. Thank you.
We thank the first negative for that fine speech. To continue, we call upon the second affirmative. Here.
Okay. Hi, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Before going on to my extension, I will bring 3 points of rebuttals, right? First, regarding the push for innovation and more effective solar panels, right? Do realize this is their main mechanism regarding how they still want to innovate. They still want to create a more effective solar panels and any traditional renewable energy source, right? 2 responses into this. First, we think the reason why this is a lost cause in terms of their mechanism, because the problem that we experience right now with traditional renewable source is not regarding the innovation or regarding the technology or the insufficient use of the technology, right? The problem is the capability barrier in which country does not have strong, like for example, flow of rivers or like flow of like the wind and whatnot that are able to, to properly make the power plant functions, the power plant functions, right? The problem is not about innovation and pushing a more effective solar panels and any kind of traditional renewable source. The problem is within that the country on and of itself has the geographical barrier in which they cannot use the solar panels or they cannot use the water, the source plant properly or effectively. Within that, that's the problem that they cannot solve from their speech previously, right? But second response then, within they argue that we need to develop the technology to for it to be more perfect, right? They argue that how, oh, this process is still not perfect, how you will still create residue from the coal and whatnot, right? Right. Within that, the process of creating innovation for this coal gasification will be better and will be faster in our side of the house, right? The question is not what happened now, right? The question is how the push for this gasification will eventually create a better outcome in the future, right? The moment UP doesn't want to go through this process, the moment UP doesn't want to create push in using the coal gasification, is the moment that they will stuck in the current problem forever, right? So we think the margin in this particular point is that the even if right now is not perfect, what they were pushing for a better outcome in the future, we're pushing for more development, we're pushing for the significant reducement of coal residue, which will never happen in the sort of house. I will further elaborate this in my extension, right? But second point I want to rebut from opposition, right? They argue about how extraction will still exist on both sides of the house, extraction will still be bad in government and whatnot. And this is also their main arguments. They have repeated this for like most of their speech, right? Several responses into this, right? Within that, it significantly reduced the harm of coal usage in our side of the house, right? Please read the context slide. I think this is a fiat that you already have to bite, that there is a significant reducement of the harm from the coal usage using this gasification, right? But let's just assume that the extractions that exist is still bad, right? Let's compare it of what will happen in their side of the house, right? I think in countries where they don't have access to coal or oil, they usually have brought like or like made pipelines and a lot of engineering mechanism to transport coals from other countries, right? This is what they did in EU. This is what they did in Middle East. It's something that has been used for the past decades for them to like transport coals and oils and whatnot, right? Whether this has been the most accessible and cheapest way for countries currently that do not have coal as their natural resources, right? What does this mean? Two things. First, in the era where environment becomes an important issue, we think it's easier to shift to a coal gasification because they already have the pipeline to transport the gas as an end result of the coal gasification. There are also like precedenting mechanism for them to transport coal, so it's eliminate a lot of risks during the export and the import, right? But second, it's also way cheaper for them to use the gasification. They do not have to build the whole like power plant and whatnot, right? On comparison then, right, in their side of the house, in opposition, the moment you need to create traditional renewable energy source like power plant, you need to sacrifice a whole lot, right? You have to build the power plant from scratch, which requires a lot of money. You have to search and look for a proper place that has enough wind or enough wave to do it. And based on those two, we think it's barely feasible for countries to do this, right? Not every country's geographical characteristic is feasible to build power plants, or at the very least, there are big limitations in the amount of power plants that they can actually use inside their country, right? But B, is also unknown as to how you can import traditional renewable energy sources from other countries, right? The only way for countries to fulfill the demand of this energy is by still buying coals anywhere, right? That is to say, within the result and opposition is two things, right? A is either they have to spend so much money in order for them to build power plant and even do chemical engineering method to make sure there are enough wind and wave and and climate to make sure the power plant is enough for their whole country. But second, they will still use a coal as their main alternative as it's way cheaper and more accessible, right? That is to say, it will be significantly bad in their side of the house for the environment, right? It's also unreasonably burdening developing countries that has lack economic capabilities, for example, and countries that probably does not have suitable geographic requirement, right? That is to say, if you want to talk about how there will still be like harm from our side of the house, we think the comparison is way worse in their side of the house, because at the end of the day, in opposition, not only that the harm to the environment still exists, it also cause like economic, it costs a lot of money, it costs a lot of effort for this country to actually change and shift into the whole this traditional renewable source, which is way more expensive, which is way more complicated, right? It's not feasible to begin with, right? So within that, we have a better chance to actually make this proposal work. Right? But lastly, I want to rebut coming from opposition, right? They told you about how people will lose incentive to actually stop using coal, and people will have less incentive to make the environment better. Right? Several responses to this. First, within incentive to save the planet exists on both sides of the house, right? Within the tipping point of this debate is not about which one has the motivation to do so, but how we actually do it pragmatically, right? Within by significantly reduce the harm from the coal usage, we already show how much motivated we want how motivated we are to want to stop using coal, right? But second response, even if we have to engage to that particular argument, right? I think the push will still exist by other campaigns from these environmentalists and discourse regarding saving the planet, right? This agenda also pushed by G20 and Paris Agreement and any international institution, for example. So yes, it might not be a perfect attempt. We still use coal, obviously, but people will still pursue it wholeheartedly. There are a lot of alternatives that push for this agenda to continue in the future within their alternative to solve this problem, right? But lastly, about my extension, and I will talk about how we actually attract more investors and why it's going to be better for the movement and for the whole environmental issue in general, right? Based on the first, we think that we would more likely attract investors. There are the prerequisite of investors several things, right? They like familiarity, right? They like mechanism of technology that has been used for a long time because they are more guaranteed to be successful at the very least avoid risk of failure, right? This is why investors are more likely to invest on a well-known or well-used product like phone, television over something like the digital refrigerator or something that is new, right? But B, even if it's a new thing, investor will prefer to invest in product that has abundant resources and accessibility, right? That is to say, investor will likely want to invest on companies with coal gasification rather than traditional renewable resources, right? This is going to be helpful for the existing company, especially in countries that has limitation in building energy plant. But it's even better because not only it helps the company to reproduce, this investment could also help speed up the proliferation of coal gasification and the development of this technology, in which help the search of a healthier and cheaper mechanism of producing energy, right? So this means this solves two things, right? A, this solves the communality that countries all around the world want to pursue in the environmental issue, because it helps even countries with like limited economic capabilities. This helps developing countries. It helps countries with their geographical difference to actually opt into this mechanism to solve the environmental issue and to help reduce like the harm to the environment, right? But second, this also help push forward researches on technologies that hasn't been solved in the current status quo. Right? This help people to actually do more researches about coal gasification, and in order to reduce as much harm that the coal usage cause. We are so proud to propose. Thank you.
We thank the second affirmative for that fine speech. To continue, we call upon the second negative. Here.
Am I audible, Kak? Hello.
Can you repeat it again? Try.
Am I audible, Kak?
Yep, you're audible.
Give me a few seconds of my timer first. Negative. Hello, my name is Ahmad Barati. My gender pronoun he or him. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Nearly 100% die in China after hot storm that exists after climate change. Nearly a lot of people cannot be survived since the flood that exists come from climate change that exists in Indonesia. This condition will lead to us to understanding that urgency is something that are very big. What we need right now is not only short-term solvency on how we are able to reduce the impact of climate change, but on how we are able to stop every single thing that worsening the climate change at the very begin with. All the things that come from the government thing just rely on the short-term impact on how they're able to reduce it, but never cannot be solved at the problem at the end of the day, right? Several response to what government case. First, when they're talking that, developing some certain technologies such as renewable energy will spend too much money and some that are very expensive. Two response there. First, we believe that the expensivity will be somewhat symmetrical, since under the side of government team, they're also conducting a massive investment, means that they will also spend too much money in there. But second, inside of the government team, they will should conducting any reparation after the climate change that creating a lot of environmental devastation as an impact of the coal that exists inside of the government team. We say those massivity is something that exists, but even if it's only exists inside of the opposition team. Why it's still okay? 3 reasons. First, we believe that those expensive will happen in the short term, because we believe later, after those technology become something that massive, that every single country have the ability to build it become something that accessible. It's also happened with the mobile phone, that firstly it become something that are very expensive, but after this, every single people can have the ability to afford it. We say it's something that are very common. But second, we believe that spending will be something that are same, since they will also spending the money to repair the devastation that exists, right? But thirdly, we say that the coal is something that are very limited at the end of the day. What does it mean? Yes, might be they still use the coal, might be for 30 years, for example. But after this, when the coal is run out of resources, they need to search for new energy. We say it's something that are very it's become more expensive at the end of the day. That's why we oppose. My another rebuttal will be integrated on my speech. What I'm going to talk to you on my speech, 2 things. Why it can create an inclusive energy choice toward every single country. But second, why this comparative, why using gasification will still harmful inside of government team. Let's jump the first one. Why it can create an inclusive energy choice toward every single country. Before the several contextualizing, we believe that coal is being manipulated and monopolized by some certain countries who have that natural resources. Example given what happened with Russia when they used to determine EU to support the Ukraine, for example. We believe this condition is no longer beneficial. But how does the world look like inside of opposition? 2 things. First, in opposition, we will opposing every single use of coal. But second, we will propose toward every single countries to slowly changes toward the renewable energy. As environmentalists, you will ask for the funding funding or open donation developing those some certain technology. We'll never make it as a symbol that every single country should be changed every single call, but we will conduct it slowly. So there's a time for them to conducting to do some preparation. For example, we will use such as solar panel, windmill, or even creating a dam in river, for example. But the question is why it can creating an inclusive energy. I think my first speaker has been told to you on how every single country will have their chance to maximize their natural resources. For example, Middle East countries, we can maximize their geographical position to use the solar panel, or even windmill that been conducting by Europe countries like Netherlands and so far and so on, or even dam river that can be used by tropical countries such as Indonesia. We believe this condition is something that's much more inclusive rather than the existence of coal that only exists in some certain countries. We believe it's no longer beneficial. But the question is here is why those countries will want to change. The likelihood is 2 reasons. First, the awareness that coming from a lot of countries that the energy is something that are very crucial first, moreover in international community. Example given what happened Russia, we use their ability to abandon EU, for example. That's why they will realize after they will realize that ability to control the energy within the countries is something that are very important to maintaining their legacy, to maintaining their sovereignty, and so far and so on. But second, the existence of climate change that exists, we believe can trigger every single countries that how then what happened with climate devastation is something that are very harmful. This argument basically also rebuttal the argument that the limitation of geographical thing we say is no longer stands. But the question is on how I making this argument. Why it's important? 2 reasons. First, it will reducing the usage of coal that devastating the environment. That I've been told to you that the most important right now is on how we are able to stop the acceleration of the climate change. It's something that are very urgent to do so. But second, we believe it will be able to fulfilling the interest of environmentalists. Why is that so? Because we believe the interest of environmentalists not only to creating an eco-friendly energy, but also inclusivity of energy toward every single people in society. In opposition team, there will no longer any countries who will depend on some certain countries who have the ability to to provide coal such as Russia and so far and so on. But even if it, yes, it will spending a lot of money, we say it's still okay inside of opposition. It's common thing to gather a big impact. You should sacrifice a bigger thing. We say it's very morally justified. But what is the comparative in there? Why use the gasification will still harmful? We believe there is still two things. We believe there is still a carbon pollution that acts as residue come from the process to creating the gasification. Means that there will be still a factor or variable what accelerate the climate change. But second, since the climate change has been already worse, when it become more accelerate, mean that the harm that will be accessed in the future will be still big, will be bigger and will be more harmful toward people. Might be not just 1,000 people, but 100 people will die because of the climate change. We say it's no longer beneficial. But the question is on how I making this argument. We say in best case scenario come from the government team, when the energy becomes something that are very accessible, we say it's the best case scenario. Why is still harmful? Because we realize since it become very accessible, means that there will be no tendency for every single people to reduce the usage of energy. Mean that they will always use all the energy that they're able to afford as much as possible, as much as they want. For example, they're watching TV even though they need it. For example, we say it's something that we should prevent as environmentalists. But what is the comparative in there? The comparative, even under very worst case scenario inside of the opposition team, when those energy will become something that are very expensive, we say it's still beneficial because in long term we are able to create a progressivity, but in the short term we are able to push some certain people to stop use energy that are not necessarily to do at the very begin with. We believe it's much more important to stop the environment and to stop the environment devastating. All this reason, very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you. Give me one moment. Okay. We thank second negative for that speech. To continue, we call upon third affirmative. Here.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yep.
Great. I'm not sure if a trigger warning is like necessary for this motion. Just like since it's being live streamed, everything that I say might not always be a reflection of my own personal opinion. It's just for the purpose of this debate. Okay. Okay, that's better. Existence is a fundamental cycle of energy. Insofar as energy is always required to survive, in no way that humanity, in order to will abandon the most sustainable and the longest used resource since the beginning of humanity in order to change into an uncertain alternative. Don't let opposition fool you. The counterfactual is never that in gov they fool you, the environment, and in opposition they don't at all. The comparative is coal processed in a more eco-friendly way in gov, and it being burned the traditional way in that side of the house because of all the reasons that we told you that they pleasantly but unwisely ignored. Insofar as we make progress, be it as infinitesimal as it might sound at worst, that is still marginally better, absent the structural mechanisms opposition did not choose to provide. Opposition criticized our mechanism that it leads closer to climate change. It is ironic, but their case literally does nothing to prevent it from happening, while also neglecting people on the ground suffering of energy crisis, and that they are substantially less happy. Two questions I addressed in this speech. The first is that this is possible to be done, and the second is obviously why does this action bring buy-in? On the first thing, and I want to note that it's very important. Is this actually plausible to be done, right? This is already independently debate winning if you wanna if you credit this this argument, this is independently debate winning because we have finite resources. As environmentalists, you probably have finite influence over the decisions that governments or companies make. Insofar as you have finite influence, the question is how you want to use those influences to make the most tangible impact as you can. I also want to note that it means that we ought to make changes to not lose trust and legitimacy, because insofar as you continue to make advocacy, but you never actually make tangible changes, people eventually lose trust on you as environmentalist movement. Insofar as all of other impacts of these debates are quite speculative, the winning argument is the one explaining why we have better net utility, i.e. more people access energy and less environmental harm. We're going to tell you why this wins in our side of the house. 3 things we claim in Gov. The first that we claim is investor signal, right? Well, what we claim was that this is likely to be done through 4 mechanisms that I think opposition failed to respond to. The first thing that we told you was that investors are most likely risk averse, i.e. they want and they value certainty. They want their investment to certainly pay out for them in the end, which is, like I want to link this directly to the characteristics of like gasification that I think we already proved since the beginning of this debate. We proved that, gasification are proven to be certain, i.e. changing the form of the coal from solid to gas. It's proven to be certain to make like better energy output, but also more environmentally friendly. We're like it's much more likely that investors are likely to appeal to our side of the house rather than their side of the house with really uncertain result as to when you will find the renewable energy. We find no explanation from the first 2 speakers of that side of the house. The second thing we claim was the current economic condition, i.e., the crisis and all of those stuff. Probably investors like one quick repayment and like immediate profit that they can get in our side of the house, i.e. waiting for sustainable energy is very uncertain. But even if it is certain, it takes much more complicated process. I think we told you before that a large responded by their side of the house. So insofar as investors want to seek for like quick repayment and immediate profit, they probably will listen to us in our side. The third thing we told you was that investors probably require international network and stuff like that. We're talking about the current context of gas pipelines that are built across EU and BRI, for example. So gasified coal is probably more likely to be easier to transport insofar as the pipeline that is built is designated systematically to transport coal from one country to another, like what happens in EU. But lastly, investors probably like to invest on low risk and low starting point in things like developing states, which probably means that they need to avoid super difficult technologically savvy process like dealing with renewable energy that I'm certain to have to resolve in the end. What we claim to be the problem with renewable energy is 4 things. The first thing that we claim was it's expensive, right? The response we heard from Up was that, in the future it's going to be cheap. But it's killed their own harm then, because they claim that, coal gasification is expensive. But with that old logic, we can say in the future it's going to be expensive as well. So there's absolutely no delta in this debate. What we proved was that empirically, renewable energy like metal straws, for example, or like other green technologies are probably like substantially much more expensive. So we win in empirical evidence. The second thing I told you was that if there was high technological advancement, i.e. you need to make like sophisticated solar panel, for example, to absorb energy and stuff like that. The third thing we told you was that this is really unable to be mass produced. Like, it's really difficult to, consolidate all those energies to transfer it like all across the nation. But lastly, you have slower process of energy conversion. And this is where the science comes in, right? You have much more residual, you have much more residue in their side of the house, insofar as you have no catalyst to convert the energy from the renewable energy to things like electricity in the output. This is because even if energy can be changed, but the conversion process of that energy requires a catalyst. And that is why coal is really easy to change, because there's a catalyst in the burning process that exists internally. That's why cars run much faster on gas rather than water if it can at all. That sounds way too scientific for a team that has no fucking idea how this works. But we think insofar as investors, i.e. companies and states, are likely to consider these, and that they ought abide by international conventions, i.e. Paris Agreement, we win because we prove why they're likely to want to do this. So this is not only a positive case, but this is comparatively better because opposition cannot be winning this debate insofar as they are substantially less persuasive to investors. Why are they likely to listen to our side of the house? 3 mechanisms that we told you. The first is that it prevents backlash by posting of environmental social media, for example, right? Because if they don't do this, and probably big like Twitter's like Greta Thunberg or AOC will probably condemn that. They probably don't want that. The second is competitive advantage. So they can market this as the quality of their product. Oh, we're using gasified coal, for example. It's much more environmentally friendly. People are likely to want to buy that. But lastly, they can also still maintain relatively cheaper price that they can maintain market sustainability. This is also true empirically. A lot of technologies like geoengineering already got massive investment from like companies and states who probably want to invest on this in our side of the house. We heard nothing from that side of the house. It's too late for WIP to say that. They cannot win absent this analysis framework. Because even if you buy all the other arguments and nerds out now, they literally have zero solvency. But big words do not, unfortunately, win this debate. The second thing that we claim was that the likely counterfactual is substantially worse. The first thing we argued was why the counterfactual is not the non-usage of coal, but in opposition, even assuming through their logical leap that it's likely to be successful, that the push is successful, we think it's more likely that they continue utilizing coal in a non-eco-friendly way because of at least 3 empirical reasons. The first is that investors probably want to look for any possible avenue. Coal is literally right there. It's a sitting duck, right? You can claim them, you can mine them, you can reap the profit. It's unclear why they will not use coal otherwise in their side of the house. Anyway, secondly, we have energy crisis due to Ukraine war, right? Like a lot of states, a lot of companies are probably really struggling for an alternative for energy. So they're finding every other alternative possible. If it's a sitting duck coal, they probably want to take that. But lastly, coal is still something fundamentally important. A lot of people use it for even trivial things like household requirement, like electricity, to even macro level project, like the railroad trains, for example, carrying supply all the way through New Silk Road of BRI. This means that all the alleged harms from opposition, i.e. ecological damages, are lessened in Gulf and insinuated worse in that side of the house. Insofar it's going to be traditionally processed because you have no push down method in them to do anything on that. So that deal opening rhetoric backfires to themselves. But then the response we got for all up was that, but not everyone has coal. This is a horrible response. The first thing we claim was that not everyone has renewable energy too. That we claim from top of the debate. So portability then becomes the primary tipping point, right? Because we told you why it's much more easy to, they're much more portable, right? Like gasified coal and stuff like that. But secondly, it's unclear why monopolization, even if that's the harm, happens. Regulation of fossil fuel works. But insofar as it's a market potential, I think a lot of companies have incentives to cooperate. I.e., a Serbian company can join a bilateral deal with a EU mining company, so everyone gets access to coal. Not everyone gets access to expensive renewable energy. But then the last thing that they claim was, but coal runs out. This is not only empirically untrue, but even if this is true, this is likely to take quite a while, right? So in the meantime, we ought to use what we have in this side of the house. By the time it runs out, surely we'll already have the renewable energy if it's really easy to produce in their side. But insofar as we told you, it still be used as uncomparative. In the end of this debate, what we proved to you was two things. The first is that we told you what investor signaling is better in our side of the house, which is a precondition for literally every benefit we see in this side of the house. But the second thing we told you was that the counterfactual is even worse. If they want to stand for stopping energy crisis, if you believe in stopping energy crisis, please affirm.
We thank third affirmative for that speech. To continue, we call upon third negative. Here.
Hi, is my voice audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, senior pronounce is your her. Wait, setting up my timer. And by the way, I'm so sorry I cannot turn on my camera because it's currently raining so hard in here. Wait. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. They left the fact that they should continuously extracting those coal gasification by saying that, oh, at least we're eliminating the damage and whatsoever. They are only playing on their best case scenario, which we also accept that this coal gasification is the most viable and effective clean coal. But in the end of the day, you need to face the damage in the end of the day, right? In conclusion, you still need to face the damage. The damage are foreverly there because you will foreverly extracting it since they will left behind renewable energy, so they will extracting it foreverly, right? They prove to you that at least under their side, they have tangible changes, but it is in short term, right? Sure, it is in short term, but we think that the damage are still there, that they never engage to that case, and they never accept why then that damage, why repairing the damage is something that worth it, and why it is something that perfectly fine since the first place, right? Let's compare to what we already do. Even if take times, it's already under our side. At least under our side, we don't have to repair the damage. For examples, we have this renewable energy, right? This is the tipping point. First of all, we have the progress of improving the renewable technology, for examples. But second, at least we have end result, right? We have this renewable energy in the end of the day, which also settled in the future. That's why there will be no damage in the future at best, right? That's why it's going to be better under our side. Even though it is take time, we think that it is perfectly fine. The tipping point is the sustainability in the future. We don't have to repair the damage at all, like what government do since the first place, right? But second things, the questions to us, they say that our environmentalists are going to be foreverly stagnant, for examples, on the same problem and whatsoever, right? We're questioning how this is going to be happen, right? Environmentalists is not reckless at all. They have knowledge, they understand about this, means they're going to do everything in improving the this progress and they are going to massively invest on this, means they won't stagnant on this problem since the first place, right? Or even lastly, they are being too assumptive, right? To what actor do, to what actor going to do, like state, company, society, and whatsoever, right? Sure, it is internationally accepted as the least friendliest coal, for example, but the impact of extraction are still there. The society, everyone, states, company know that they need to repair the impact in the future, the impact of these extractions. Why they still want to use the coal gasifications since the first place, right? Even though it is effective, even though it is available in every country, for example, but the moment the damage are still there, why didn't they still want to use this since the first place, right? We don't think they don't want they want to use this because they still need to repair the damage in the future. They're going to be even more it is going to be better if they focus on renewable energy, they support the environmentalist research and whatsoever. That's why it is going to be better under our positions, right? Moving on to my first class, whether or not it is strategic investment target or not, right? They prove to you that progress are not there. It is inaccessible, inexpensive, capability barrier. Developing country don't want to invest on this and whatsoever. Let's rebut this one by one, right? Let's list this by the actor and let's analyze why the actor want to invest on this renewable energy, right? First of all, government, they realize the climate change are currently can be felt, right? They currently felt the climate change already happened. For example, they get demonstrations from the society, for example, they already get policy about environmental and whatsoever. That's why it is likely for the government, even in the developing country, to support the improvement of this renewable energy. Even the education are already support about the renewable energy, right? That's why government want to also invest on this since the first place and help the environmentalists to improve this in the end of the day. That's why government going to help us anyway, right? But the company, second actor, right? Company, they realize the climate change happens. Moreover, pragmatism, they understand that they need to spend money on repairing damage that they created, or can be called as CSR, for example. In the end, they want to lessen their spending by investing on this renewable energy. They don't want to foreverly pay for the CSR, for example, because simply they use coal gasification forever, for example. They don't want to foreverly spend their money on the CSR, for example, because they want to improve maximizing their products by using their financial, for example. That's why companies are going to also use the renewable energy, right? But thirdly, let's talk about investor, right? They prove to you that investor going to be interested on coal gasifications and whatsoever, right? We're questioning why, right? The characterizations, what is the characterizations of investor and why they have this interest on this, right? The characterization of investor, they put money there, right? They pragmatic, therefore they want sustainability, they want long-term benefit, they don't want something that's zero sum. When the moment they don't want like what government already do that, government do, right? And the government, their investment money going to be used to repair the impact of extraction of coal gasifications, for examples. Under our side, it is going to be more preferable because it's okay to take time to focus on the renewable energy first, but in the end, they don't have to repair the damage and whatsoever, right? Therefore, investor going to be better under our side, right? But next is environmentalists, right? Doesn't mean they did nothing in the current status quo, right? They already improved, they already did research, for example. We don't want their current research going to be zero-sum game. It is the golden time for us to improve, to focus on their research, for example. They already have the basic knowledge of renewable energy, for example. We don't want to utilize that since the first place. We don't want to make it zero-sum game in the end of the day. But lastly, society, right? First of all, they want to prefer this renewable energy because they currently exposed with campaign that they want something to be friendly to environment, for example, or even in education. SMK student in Indonesia, they have intention in creating renewable energy and whatsoever, right? We think that we should utilize this intention of society since the first place. That's why it's going to be better and it is more strategic under our side, right? They prove, but the second thing that they prove to you, right? They're going to make it accessible. Exactly, it's going to be harmful. Everyone, every state, every company try to use coal gasification. The impact of extraction are going to be even more bigger under their side. That's why it can be called as unstrategic investment, right? and strategic investments, because it's also still creating damage in the end of the day. But lastly, let's take trade-off, right? Even though it is taking time under our side, or even we still need to repair the impact of ordinary coal in the meantime of waiting of the renewable energy. We think that it is perfectly fine, right? This is the tipping point, Judge. You still you need to weigh this point by those two things. First of all, under our side, at least we're less harmful. In the future, we have this end result. We have this renewable energy to take role of the coal, for example. That's why there will be less victim under our side in the future. That's why it is going to be better under our side, right? We can rely on this renewable energy. That's why we should still focus on the massive investment of this, right? But second question here, they prove to you that we are going to be seen as elitists, as environmentalists. We think that there is no, since the first place we open and always share about our knowledge, about our research, and it won't be foreverly expensive because we are going to invest on that. Everyone is going to be everyone is going to focus on renewable energy. That's why everyone is going to have this renewable energy, and it won't be expensive in the end of the day. But moreover than that, it is going to be seen. They're going to be seen as inconsistent, right? When currently they focus and glorifying about renewable energy, but in the end of the day, they left behind this renewable energy by using this coal gasification and whatsoever, right? We don't want this. In the end of the day, we want to be appreciated by the society. We want to be seen as consistent. We're proud to oppose.
We thank the third negative for that speech, and that wraps up all the substantive speakers in this debate. So let's continue on to the reply speakers. We call upon the negative reply. Here.
Audible, Kak?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, great. Sip. Give me a second to tap my timer first. Reply. Next number none, he or him. Starting my, I want to on cam first. Okay. I will starting my reply speech and 3, 2. The biggest concession in this debate is on how we should believe that the effect of climate change is something that are very devastation. We realize the background of me right now will no longer exist 10 years later because of the existence of climate change that can reduce every single beautiful place that exists, right? We believe the biggest question inside of the government team is on how they'll be able to solve this worsening climate change that exists, since every single decision that they made just reducing the effect of the coal at the very beginning. What does it mean? It means that those coal still accelerate the climate change that we believe is no longer beneficial. Two class on my reply speech. First, under the short-term impact, but second, under the long-term impact. Judges, please rely if you want to talking about which side can be provide something that are expensive. You should understand why then the expensive thing that exists inside of government team is no longer beneficial. First, they should spend too much money to accelerate the production of coal gasion, but second, they should also spend too much money to mitigate and also to repair the effect of the climate change. For example, the existence of scarcity that exists because the farm cannot produce any food, and also another climate devastation is something that should be repaired inside of the government team. But what is the comparative in there? The comparative is inside of the opposition team, yes, might be, it could be something that are very expensive at the very begin with, but those conditions is still very beneficial for us to mitigate or to, for some certain people, the usage of the energy that exists, because we believe minimalize people usage of energy under the current status quo is something that's important to minimize the effect of climate change. But secondly, when they're talking about the geographical problem because of the renewable energy is not suitable with every single country, the question is on how it would be manifest at the end of the day. We believe since it's not suitable for every single countries, they will try to maintaining what is some certain specific thing that's most suitable for me. For example, if you stay in the Middle East, you will maximize the solar panel. If you stay in tropical countries, you will maximize the dam to every single river. We believe it still be something that are very beneficial to every single country that exists. But it's the comparative in there. The comparative is inside of the government team, it will very hard for them to propose it because those coal will be monopolized by some certain countries, and it also can be used for them to conducting any international pressure toward other countries. The best example is what happened with Russia to abandon EU to supporting Ukraine, for example, to creating any justice. We believe it's something that no longer beneficial. But let's talking about the long-term impact in this debate. The biggest question come from the government team is on how they'll be able to stopping the climate change, to stopping the worsening condition come from climate change. We believe it still already exists. Those oil gases still exist, means that the acceleration of the climate change still exists. What does it mean? There will be a lot of people suffer. Yes, they will say that, oh, we are never left out some certain people that under the middle to lower class because they are still able to access the energy, but then they become the victim of the climate change, right? They cannot access the basic necessity since there's access of shortage that access come from scarcity led by the climate change. We believe it's no longer beneficial. But what is the comparative in that? In long term, we believe it will be more beneficial for us. We will use every single green energy. We will be able to stopping the climate change. We will be able to repair the earth. We will be able to prevent the scarcity. We will be able to proposing this green energy to every single people, even though you are stay under the middle low community. All this benefit we are very proud to oppose.
Okay, we take the negative reply for that. We call upon the affirmative reply to wrap up affirmative and this debate as a whole. Here.
Great, thank you so much for the call. Just making sure that I'm visible and audible.
Yep, you are.
Great, starting in 3, 2, and 1. 5 automatic reasons as to why opposition automatically lost the debate. 5 faults. Number 1, do not buy any of their framing talking about how we're living in our best case scenario, right? Literally, their only logic as to why renewable energy exists is because it's cheaper in the future. The question remains, how is it cheaper? How will you provide it right now to the people that need it the most if you say that it is going to be sustainable in the future? How do you feel like these current investors are going to opt into it knowing that it's not accessible? This is the biggest question as to what we've already addressed at the very beginning of my speech as PM. We've already portrayed to you as to why it's not accessible in the current status quo. They kept on ignoring that and just proceed to assume that it's feasible in the future. That's the first fault. That in and of itself is already the reason why they lost. But number 2, I think that they're living in an echo chamber, not engaging to the cases we have proposed regarding why other countries are able to access it, why it's not going to be expensive, for example, because it's inherently expensive. We already explained to you that, but they also haven't explained to you why countries suddenly opt into green energy that's not necessarily that sustainable to begin with, and they have to begin with, it's something that's very costly, and they need to add production costs to that. They haven't engaged to any of these things. For example, this is something that we've already glorified. We already explained why it's slightly on our side of the house. Credit that. Number 3, we do not need any portrayals regarding why something is going to be cheap in the future when you're not able to even explain why it's going to be likely that's going to be cheap. How is it that you're going to create it in the current status quo? What type of development do you want to do? I think we've already explained to you several structural reasons as to why, even with the involvement of investors or not, or consumers, even why these companies actually want to opt into it. But number 4, I think that it's very important that they necessarily always ignore the fact that this coal gasification is something that's more sustainable. I've already mentioned this in my PM speech regarding how this is a fiat. They should explain why, even if this is something that's bad, why, even if, for example, something that is sustainable, why it's completely bad in the future. They haven't engaged to that as well. I have one particular cash that I'm going to talk about in reply, right? Let's talk about practical cash, because this is the heavy part of the debate. 2 things in this one. Number 1, we told you several main structural issues as to why it's important to be engaging into gasification. We also told you as to why we're attracting investors. Literally, the explanation coming from PM to government whip regarding how there are issues with renewable energy regarding how there are stigmatization of environmentalists. Regarding how there are companies that will still touch coals. Literally, this characterization hasn't been touched by them by opposite side of the house anyway. But but comparatively, what did they tell you is that okay, renewable energy is good because it like stops deforestation. But there are also countries that's most likely going to opt into this. We posit 5 things, right? Number 1, the largest question that they have yet to answer and why they cannot answer win this cash is due to the fact that they haven't explained to you why is it likely for companies to shift to a whole new renewable energy. While we have explained to you regarding A, why it's most likely that they're going to at least shift into a more into an alternative that still involves coal because it's accessible to them. But they also haven't explained why that this particular technology regarding renewable energy is something that's already accessible anyway in the current status quo. But number 2, they also have yet to respond to argumentations regarding the view towards environmentalism, how people and companies are going to perceive environmentalism. I think that the most damaging thing that's going to happen on their side of the house is that. But number 3, I think that we told you regarding the existence of coal gasification is a benefit to help countries who are unable to like access renewable energy because they already at least have existing technology for coal. It's only that they have to expand it, and expanding it even has already been explained regarding how, for example, these companies have the incentive to do so, how investors want to get involved because there is certain outcome because of the current economic condition that they want like tangible return, regarding how there is international network, regarding how there is low risk and low starting point, for example. But even at the end of the day, they still haven't explained to you why the future is certain and when is the future that they mean. In all, they haven't explained to you the tangible mechanism under their side of the house, therefore making all of their benefits very hard to buy. At our side of the house, we already engaged as to why it's possible, why it's likely, why it's very hard to shift into renewable energy. Proud to propose.
We thank the affirmative reply for that speech, and that wraps up this debate as a whole. Yay! Congratulations for finishing the 3rd round of today. So debaters, please stay in this breakout room. Also, Arcom, you can also stop recording. For Jenny, can you meet me in this courtroom B08, and we will sit there. So debaters, don't leave anywhere. Yeah.